The first question comes from a listener of Improve Photography Plus, who says, does using the silent shutter mode increase my chances of a sharper photo? He recently switched to silent shutter mode and was just wondering if it would produce less vibration, or if you still have to follow the 1 over the focal length rule. Well, Sandy, I know this is one you've been playing with a little bit. What say you?
Yeah, it's so ironic because I switched over to quiet mode today because I was shooting a PR event where I wanted to be a little bit more of a incognito fly on the wall. And I think I don't know, I could be way off. I kind of felt like it was the opposite. It took a little longer to take the shot. And if it was a faster, I don't want to say shutter speed, but whatever it is that makes it so that it's quieter and slower.
Yeah,
I
it's
felt
the mirror. The mirror flaps up, then it waits a second, then the shutter goes.
Mm-hmm. I didn't like it. And on top, it slowed me down because I couldn't take as many photos in a shorter amount of time. So I switched it right back to single shot.
You're like, no, I don't need this. Well, I've used silent shutter mode quite a bit. I used it when I was in college, and I would photograph events like, concerts, like piano concert, like it's dead silent. You can hear a pin drop, and you're like, ka-chunk, 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 and people look at you like, quiet that thing down. So it's a really useful thing, or during a wedding ceremony. It's something that I actually use pretty regularly, or if you're trying to take a photo incognito and you don't want people to hear the click of the shutter. It's a really useful thing. I actually had a pretty similar experience to you, Sandy, that I didn't see any sharpness gain at all. In fact, it hurt me, but it's just because of my bad behavior, because if you're used to, you press the shutter and then as soon as you hear the ka-chunk, you're done, right? And so because there's that it's adding length to that sound, there's ka-chunk, it takes that extra second because it's flapping up the mirror, and then the shutter click, and then it closes the mirror. Then just my muscle memory is I heard the clunk, and so I'm done. And so I was moving too quickly, my hand, and so I had sharpness problems for that. But that's just bad behavior. That's not a perfect scenario by any means. How about you, Stephen? What do you think?
It's interesting. I remember with my DSLR, I remember trying the silent shutter modes, and I remember they were a little bit quieter. They weren't that much quieter for me. Like if you're doing something sound sensitive, you're still going to hear the camera going up. However, I have seen on the newer Fuji cameras and some of the Sony cameras the electronic silent shutter mode, which is completely 100% silent.
Yep.
And it blows my mind. You could be in a completely silent auditorium, like during a wedding or a baptism, and be taking picture after picture after picture, and no one is hearing any kind of shutter sound at all. And I think it is definitely handy. I do think that the picture quality is not as good when you're just doing the electronic shutter, because you're going to have you're subject to all the line scan, but whether it's a question of getting the shot and disturbing someone, or getting something that's maybe not as good, but the entire event goes on undisturbed, it's a fantastic feature. I'm crazy about it.
Yeah, so there are some cameras that have had problems with mirror flap. The Nikon D800, the original, was one of them. That there was a reduced sharpness from mirror flap. You usually don't see it when you're at 1/50th of a second, 1/100th of a second, 1/1000th of a second. It's too short for that vibration to make too much of a difference. But when you get down to those slower shutter speeds, 1/5 of a second, 1/10th of a second, that's where you can really see that difference from the mirror flap. And so quiet shutter, if you have a camera that's prone to this problem, I think definitely can help. But most cameras, this is something they're carefully engineering to get around, is that problem with this mirror flap. And so quiet shutter is really just lengthening the time between mirror up and shutter. So yeah, I think it could help on some of those cameras. On most cameras, especially made in the last couple of years, not so much of an issue. The other thing I wanted to mention, Stephen, is the electronic shutter on the Fuji cameras, and some other cameras have it as well, really is awesome. It's a neat feature to have. I mean, it's as quiet as your cell phone. There's just no, I mean, the cell phones, make the fake shutter, but except for that, if you turn that off, there's just really no sound. And so for that concert, for the wedding, something like that, it's awesome. So the difference is, if you're not aware of this, if any of the listeners aren't, usually there's a physical mechanical shutter on our cameras, and that's what's making our click. But this is, it just tells the sensor, hey, turn on and record, stop recording. And it's not right. the physical shutter, it's just turning it off and on very quickly to make a shutter. It's not as accurate. There are scanning problems as you're going between those lines, but the promise is there, and it's really useful in some situations. So that's a little bit about our quiet shutter. Could help, I guess, if you have one of those cameras that's prone to the issue.